The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor of our Lagos penthouse as Kwame's hand connected with my face in front of his 3 closest friends. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of Victoria Island traffic below. "Adunni, you embarrass me again like that, and next time it won't be just a slap." Kwame's voice was cold, calculated. His friends, Emeka, Tolu, and Adunni, sat frozen on our Italian leather sofa, their eyes avoiding mine. These were men I had cooked for, laughed with, treated like family for 5 years of marriage. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat spread across my dark skin. The ring Kwame had given me during our elaborate Lagos wedding felt suddenly heavy on my finger. This wasn't the first time, but it was the first time he dared to lay hands on me in front of others. The humiliation burned deeper than the physical pain. "Kwame, maybe we should," Emeka started, but Kwame cut him off with a wave. "Stay out of this, Emeka. This is between me and my wife." My wife. The words that once filled me with pride now tasted bitter. I was Adunni Okafor, a successful marketing executive at one of Lagos's top advertising firms. I had built my own career, my own reputation, and yet here I stood, reduced to nothing more than an object of my husband's rage. "I only asked you to lower your voice because the neighbors might hear," I said quietly, my hand still pressed to my cheek. "You were shouting about your business deals. Don't tell me how to talk in my own house." Kwame's eyes blazed with a fury I'd seen growing over the past year. Success had changed him. His construction company had landed several government contracts, and suddenly he believed he owned everyone around him, including me. The friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. Tolu cleared his throat and stood up. "Maybe we should leave you two to sort this out." "Nobody's leaving," Kwame commanded, pouring himself another glass of the expensive whiskey I'd bought him for his birthday. "Adunni needs to understand her place. You all need to see what happens when a woman forgets her position." The words hit me like physical blows. This from the man who used to whisper poetry in Yoruba into my ear, who had promised to cherish me until his dying breath. The man I'd stood beside through his struggles, using my salary to pay rent when his business was failing. "Your position?" I repeated, my voice gaining strength. "Kwame, I helped build everything you have. I was there when—" The second slap came faster than the first, snapping my head to the side. This time, Adunni stood up abruptly. Kwame, this is too much. We're leaving." I said, "Nobody moves." Kwame's voice boomed through the apartment. "You see how she talks back? This is what I deal with every day. A woman who thinks her university degree makes her equal to a man." I straightened my shoulders, tasting blood where my tooth had cut my inner lip. In that moment, looking at Kwame's twisted face and his friend's obvious discomfort, something crystallized inside me. The fear that had been growing, the excuses I'd been making, the hope that he would change, it all evaporated. "You're right, Kwame," I said softly, picking up my purse from the side table. "I do have a university degree. I also have a successful career, my own bank account, and a very good memory." His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, feeling something dangerous and liberating unfurl in my chest. "It means, my dear husband, that you just made the biggest mistake of your life." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. His friends looked between us, sensing the shift in the room's energy. Kwame's confidence wavered for just a moment. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded as I walked toward the door. "To visit my sister Folake. I need to make some phone calls." I paused at the door, my hand on the ornate handle we'd chosen together during happier times. "Oh, and gentlemen," I addressed his friends without looking back, "you might want to start distancing yourselves from Kwame. Very soon." I walked out, leaving behind the sound of Kwame's angry voice and his friends' murmured questions. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Detective Inspector Sarah Ogentade, Lagos State Police. We'd been roommates at the University of Lagos, and she owed me a few favors. But that wasn't my only call to make. The second contact made my heart race with anticipation. Barrister Chioma Nwankwo, one of Lagos's most ruthless divorce attorneys and my former classmate. If Kwame thought he could humiliate me and break me down, he had no idea what storm he just unleashed. As I stepped into the Lagos night, the city's energy pulsing around me, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt truly alive. Kwame wanted to see what happened when a woman forgot her position. He was about to find out what happened when a woman remembered her power. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. Folake's apartment in Ikeja was a haven of calm after the storm I'd just weathered. My younger sister took one look at my swollen cheek and immediately led me to her kitchen, pressing a bag of frozen peas against my face. "Adunni, you can't keep letting him treat you like this," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Folake was a pediatric nurse at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and she'd seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize the signs. "This isn't the first time, is it?" I shook my head, unable to meet her eyes. "It's been getting worse since his business started doing well. He thinks money gives him the right to." I touched my lip, wincing. To what? Beat his wife. Folake's anger was controlled but fierce. "Sister, you're one of the smartest women I know. You've built your own career, your own life. Why are you accepting this?" The question hung in the air between us. Why had I been accepting it? Was it the shame of admitting my marriage was failing? The fear of starting over at 32? Or was it something deeper? The way Nigerian society often taught women to endure, to make excuses, to keep the peace at any cost? My phone buzzed with a text from Kwame. "Come home now. We need to talk." I showed Folake the message, and she snorted. The audacity of this man. He beats you in front of his friends, and then demands you come running back. "He's used to me coming back," I admitted, the shame burning in my chest. "Every other time, I've made excuses for him. I told myself he was stressed, that business was hard, that he didn't mean it. And now, I thought about the look in Kwame's eyes tonight, the calculated cruelty in his voice. Now I see him clearly for the first time. He's not stressed, Folake. He enjoys it. He likes having that power over me. My phone rang. Detective Inspector Sarah Ogentade returning my call. "Adunni, it's been too long." Sarah's warm voice filled the room as I put her on speaker. "But I have a feeling this isn't a social call." "Sarah, I need your help. It's about domestic violence, but it's complicated." "It always is." "Are you safe right now?" "Yes, I'm with my sister." "But Sarah, what I'm about to ask you, it's not just about pressing charges. I need information." There was a pause on the line. "What kind of information?" I took a deep breath. "Kwame has been bragging about his government contracts. Big money, big connections. But some of the numbers don't add up. I handle our personal finances, and his lifestyle is exceeding even his inflated income claims." Sarah's voice sharpened. "You think he's involved in something illegal?" "I think my husband might be laundering money through his construction company. And if he is, I have access to all his financial records." Folake stared at me with wide eyes. She'd never heard me talk like this. Strategic, calculating, dangerous. "Adunni, that's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" "I will. I've been his wife for 5 years, Sarah. I know where he keeps everything. I know his passwords, his safe combination, his business partners' names. If there's dirt to find, I can find it." "And you want to hand him over to the authorities?" "I want to destroy him the way he's been destroying me. But legally, thoroughly, permanently." The line went quiet except for Sarah's breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. "If what you're suggesting is true, and if you can provide evidence, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission would be very interested. These kinds of cases, they can result in serious prison time." My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. "How serious?" 10 to 20 years, depending on the amounts involved. Folake grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with concern and something that might have been admiration. "There's more," I continued. "Tonight, when he hit me in front of his friends, one of them, Biodun, looked like he wanted to stop it. I think he might be willing to testify about Kwame's character, maybe even about things he's heard. Domestic violence charges combined with financial crimes. Adunni, if you do this, there's no going back. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Kwame's hand across my face, the way his friends had watched in uncomfortable silence, the years of slowly losing myself in his shadow. Sarah, I'm more prepared than I've ever been for anything in my life. All right, but we do this properly. Document everything. Photographs of your injuries. Keep records of all communication with him. And whatever evidence you gather, we need to make sure it's obtained legally. After I hung up, Folake and I sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. Sister, what you're planning, it's going to change everything. Everything already changed tonight. I'm just deciding what comes next. My phone buzzed again, another text from Kwame, this one more demanding. Adunni, stop this childish behavior. Come home immediately or face the consequences. I showed Folake the message, and she shook her head. Even now he's threatening you. Let him threaten, I said, taking a screenshot of the message. Every threat is more evidence. Every word he says now is building the case against him. But even as I spoke with newfound confidence, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings. Kwame was not a man who lost gracefully. If I was going to take him down, I had to be smart about it. One wrong move, and I could be the one who ended up destroyed. As if reading my thoughts, my phone rang with an unknown Lagos number. Hello, is this Mrs. Adunni Okafor? The voice was crisp, professional, female. Yes, who's calling? This is Barrister Chioma Nwankwo. Your husband just called me. He wants to discuss divorce proceedings. My blood ran cold. Kwame was already making his moves, trying to control the narrative, to get ahead of whatever I might be planning. The game had begun, and he just played his first card. But he had no idea that I was no longer the same woman who had cowered in front of his friends just hours ago. The war he wanted was coming, and I intended to win it. Hit like if you're rooting for Adunni, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of women fighting back. Mrs. Okafor, I need to be very clear about something. Barrister Chioma Nwankwo's voice was steady and professional over the phone. Your husband approached me first, but after what he's told me about his expectations, I think you need to know what you're dealing with. I gripped the phone tighter, my heart racing. What kind of expectations? He wants to file for divorce on grounds of your alleged infidelity. He claims to have evidence that you've been unfaithful, and he's requesting that you receive nothing from the marriage, no alimony, no property division, nothing. The audacity took my breath away. After years of building our life together, after supporting him through his struggling business phases, after enduring his increasingly violent outbursts, he was going to paint me as the villain. Chioma, everything he's telling you is lies. I have never been unfaithful, but I have something better than denials. I have evidence of his abuse and possibly his financial crimes. I was hoping you'd say that. Adunni, I couldn't ethically represent him knowing what I know about you from university, and frankly, his demands made me uncomfortable. The way he spoke about you, it was disturbing. Folake, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, mouthed the word good and gave me a thumbs up. What did he say exactly? He referred to you as an ungrateful woman who needed to be put in her place. He also mentioned that you had been disciplined appropriately, and that any claims of abuse would be seen as lies from a vindictive wife. My free hand unconsciously went to my still swollen cheek. Even in trying to hire a lawyer, Kwame couldn't help but reveal his true nature. Chioma, can you represent me instead? I was hoping you'd ask. But, Adunni, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. I'll need you to document everything. The abuse, the financial irregularities, everything. And I'll need you to be prepared for him to get nasty. How nasty? Men like your husband don't like losing control. When they realize they're not going to get their way, they escalate. Be very careful over the next few days. After we hung up, I spent the next 3 hours with Folake, documenting every incident of abuse I could remember, every suspicious financial transaction I'd noticed, every threat Kwame had made. By the time we finished, it was nearly 2 a.m., and I had a 12-page document that painted a picture of a marriage that had deteriorated into systematic, emotional, and physical abuse. Sister, reading this all together. Folake's voice was quiet. How did you live with this for so long? It didn't start like this. It was gradual. A raised voice here, a grabbed arm there. Each incident was small enough to excuse, but together, I gestured to our documentation. Together, they show a pattern. My phone had been buzzing with calls and texts from Kwame all evening. The messages had progressed from demanding to angry to threatening. The most recent one made my blood run cold. I know where you are, Adunni. You can't hide from me forever. Come home now, or I'll come get you. He's escalating, Folake observed, reading over my shoulder. Should we call the police? Before I could answer, there was a knock at Folake's door. We both froze. It was 2:15 a.m. Nobody made social calls at this hour in Lagos unless it was an emergency. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Folake went to the window and peered through the blinds. It's him, she whispered, her face pale. Kwame is here, and he has someone with him. My heart hammered against my ribs. Through the thin walls of Folake's apartment, I could hear Kwame's voice, loud and demanding. I know she's in there, Folake. Send my wife out here so we can talk like civilized people. Should I call the police? Folake whispered, her phone already in her hand. Wait, I said, thinking quickly. This might actually work in our favor. Let me record this. I activated the voice recording app on my phone and held it up toward the door. If Kwame was going to make threats or demands, I wanted every word documented. The knocking became pounding. Adunni, I'm not leaving without you. Stop being dramatic and come out here. Sir, please keep your voice down. I heard Folake's neighbor, Mrs. Adebayo, calling from her balcony. Some of us have to work tomorrow. Mind your business, old woman. Kwame shouted back, and I heard the shock in Mrs. Adebayo's gasp. The Kwame she knew from family gatherings was charming and polite. This version was unrecognizable. Kwame, I called through the door, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's late. Go home. We can talk tomorrow. We'll talk now. Open this door, Adunni, or I'll break it down. He's threatening to break down the door, I whispered to Folake, who was already dialing 911. Good, keep recording. You think you can embarrass me by running away? Kwame's voice was getting louder, more unhinged. You think you can just walk out on your husband? I'll drag you home if I have to. The man with him, I could hear a second voice, trying to calm him down, was saying something about the neighbors calling the police, but Kwame was beyond reason. Sir, I'm calling the police, Mrs. Adebayo shouted from her balcony. You can't disturb the whole building like this. Call whoever you want. Kwame yelled back. That's my wife in there, and I have every right to take her home. Perfect. Not only was I recording his threats, but now multiple neighbors were witnessing his behavior. Any claims he might make later about being a reasonable, peaceful man would be contradicted by tonight's performance. The police sirens started wailing in the distance, growing closer by the minute. I heard Kwame's companion, it sounded like Emeka, urging him to leave before they arrived. Kwame, we need to go. Now. This isn't helping anything. I'm not leaving without my wife. But as the sirens grew louder, I heard their footsteps retreating down the corridor. By the time the police knocked on Folake's door 10 minutes later, Kwame was gone. But I had everything I needed, his threats recorded, multiple witnesses to his behavior, and clear evidence that he was escalating exactly as Chioma had predicted. As I gave my statement to the police officers, showing them my bruised face and playing the recording of Kwame's threats, I realized that tonight had been a gift. In his rage and desperation to control me, Kwame had given me more ammunition for my case than I could have gathered in weeks of careful planning. But I also knew this was just the beginning. Men like Kwame didn't back down after one failed attempt. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new attempts to break me down. The difference was, I was no longer the same woman who had accepted his abuse in silence. I was building an army, lawyers, police, evidence, witnesses, and I was going to use every weapon at my disposal to ensure that Kwame could never hurt me again. What do you think Kwame will try next? Comment your predictions below, and don't forget to share this story with someone who needs to hear it. The next morning brought unexpected developments. I was staying in a hotel in Victoria Island, a precaution Chioma had insisted on after hearing about Kwame's late-night visit to Folake's apartment, when my phone rang at 7 a.m. sharp. Mrs. Okafor? The voice was unfamiliar, professional, with a slight Igbo accent. This is Detective Chief Inspector Emeka Akwu from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Detective Inspector Ogantade suggested I call you. My heart skipped a beat. Sarah had moved fast. Yes, Inspector. Thank you for calling. Ma, I understand you may have information relevant to some financial irregularities we've been investigating. Can you meet with me today? Financial irregularities you've already been investigating? Yes, Ma. Your husband's company, Okafor Construction, has been on our radar for several months. Some of the contracts they've won, the amounts involved, let's just say certain patterns have caught our attention. I nearly dropped the phone. The EFCC was already investigating Kwame? That changed everything. Inspector, I may have access to documents that could help your investigation, but I need to know that I'll be protected. My husband, he's not going to be happy when he finds out I'm cooperating with law enforcement. Ma, we take witness protection very seriously. But you should know that if your husband is involved in what we think he's involved in, being angry will be the least of his problems. 2 hours later, I sat across from Detective Chief Inspector Akwu in a secure office at the EFCC headquarters in Ikoyi. The man was younger than I'd expected, probably in his early 40s, with intelligent eyes and a manner that immediately put me at ease. Mrs. Okafor, before we begin, I want you to understand the seriousness of what we're discussing. The contracts your husband's company has been winning from the Federal Ministry of Works total over 800 million naira in the past 18 months. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was reeling. 800 million naira? That was far more than Kwame had ever admitted to earning. The problem, Inspector Akwu continued, is that many of these contracts appear to have been awarded without proper tender processes, and the work that's been completed doesn't justify the payments made. He slid a folder across the desk to me. Inside were photographs of construction sites, payment receipts, and bank statements I'd never seen before. Your husband has been operating bank accounts that you may not know about. Large deposits, regular transfers to offshore accounts in Ghana and Dubai. This looks like a systematic money laundering operation. I studied the documents, recognizing some of the signatures and company stamps, but seeing a financial picture that was completely different from what Kwame had shown me at home. Inspector, I handle our personal finances, but I've never seen these business accounts. Kwame always said the business money was separate from our household money. Which accounts do you have access to? I told him about the joint personal account, the savings account, and the business account that Kwame used for day-to-day operations. Inspector Akwu made notes as I spoke. Mrs. Okafor, those accounts represent less than 10% of the money flowing through your husband's operations. The question is, would you be willing to help us gather evidence from the accounts and documents you do have access to? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Tell your husband his friends are asking questions about his business deals. Some people are getting nervous about government attention. A concerned friend. I showed the message to Inspector Akwu, whose eyebrows rose. Ma, it seems word is already getting out that law enforcement is interested in your husband's activities. This message suggests that his business partners are getting worried. What does that mean for me? It means we need to move quickly. If his associates think he's become a liability, or if they think you might expose them. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I thought about Kwame's friends from last night, Emeka, Tolu, and Biodun. Were they involved in whatever Kwame was doing? Had my decision to fight back put me in danger from people other than my husband? Inspector, what kind of protection can you offer me? We can provide safe accommodation, regular check-ins, and, if necessary, relocation. But Mrs. Okafor, I need you to understand that once you start cooperating with this investigation, your life is going to change permanently. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the woman who had stood in her living room 24 hours ago, accepting abuse from her husband in front of his friends. That woman was gone forever, regardless of what I chose to do now. What do you need from me? Inspector Aqua smiled for the first time since we'd met. Access to those accounts you mentioned, copies of any business documents in your home, and most importantly, we need you to act normal around your husband for a few more days while we set up surveillance. Act normal? He beat me in front of his friends yesterday. I don't think I can just pretend nothing happened. You don't have to pretend nothing happened. But we need him to think you're only dealing with the domestic situation, not investigating his business. Can you do that? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Kwame. Inspector Aqua gestured for me to answer it and pointed to a recording device on his desk. "Hello, Kwame," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Adunni, enough of this childishness. Come home. We need to talk about our marriage like civilized adults. After what you did last night, after you threatened to break down my sister's door, I was upset. You embarrassed me in front of my friends, and then you ran away like a child. But I'm willing to forgive you if you come home now, and we handle this properly." The audacity was breathtaking. He was offering to forgive me? "Kwame, I need time to think. A few days to clear my head." You don't need time to think. You need to remember your duties as a wife. Come home today, Adunni, or I'll make decisions about our marriage without consulting you. What kind of decisions? The kind that will leave you with nothing. I've already spoken to a lawyer about divorce. Don't force me to use what I know about your indiscretions. Inspector Aqua raised his eyebrows at the mention of alleged infidelity. I shook my head. It was a lie, and he could see that from my expression. "I'll call you tomorrow, Kwame. I need more time." "You have until tomorrow evening. After that, I handle things my way." The line went dead. Inspector Aqua stopped the recording and leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Okafor, your husband just made several statements that could be considered threats or extortion, combined with what we already suspect about his financial activities." He paused. "I think we need to accelerate our timeline. As we discuss the next steps of the investigation, I couldn't shake the feeling that forces much larger than my failed marriage were now in motion. Kwame's business dealings had apparently attracted the attention of federal law enforcement agencies, and I was about to become a key witness in what could be one of the biggest corruption cases in Lagos this year. But there was something else in Inspector Aqua's manner, something he wasn't telling me about the investigation. As I prepared to leave his office, I realized that my private war with Kwame had just become something much more dangerous and complex. The question was, would I survive long enough to see justice done? Don't miss what happens next. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story is about to get even more intense. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, staring at the key card to Kwame's private office. I'd had it for 3 years, ever since he'd given it to me to handle some business correspondence while he was traveling. He'd never asked for it back, probably forgotten I had it. Now it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my palm. Inspector Aqua had been clear. I needed to gather financial documents from Kwame's home office to support the EFCC investigation. But he'd also been clear that I had to do it in a way that wouldn't alert Kwame to the larger investigation. As far as my husband was concerned, I was just a bitter wife gathering ammunition for a divorce case. My phone buzzed with a text from Chioma. Kwame's lawyer called again. They're pushing for a quick settlement meeting. They want to resolve this quietly, which tells me they're nervous about something. How did your meeting with the EFCC go? I couldn't tell her everything over text, but I could give her the basics. Very productive. Meeting tomorrow to discuss coordination between the divorce case and other matters. We'll call you later. The plan was simple but risky. I would return to the apartment tomorrow morning when Kwame was at his construction site in Aja. I'd have approximately 2 hours to photograph documents, copy computer files, and gather evidence before he returned. Inspector Aqua would have a surveillance team nearby, but if something went wrong, I'd be on my own inside the apartment. My phone rang. It was Folake. Sister, I'm worried about you. Mrs. Adebayo said she saw Kwame drive by the building 3 times today. He's looking for you. I'm safe, Folake. I'm staying somewhere he can't find me. But for how long? Adunni, maybe you should consider leaving Lagos for a while. I have friends in Abuja who could. I'm not running away anymore, I interrupted, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. Kwame thinks he can intimidate me, manipulate me, make me disappear quietly while he controls the narrative. But I'm done being afraid of him. This isn't just about being brave, sister. What if he? She was interrupted by a knock at her door. We both went silent. Who is that? I whispered. I don't know. Nobody should be visiting this late. The knocking came again, followed by a man's voice I didn't recognize. Miss Folake? My name is Detective Sergeant Williams, Lagos State Police. We need to speak with you about your sister. My blood ran cold. Had something happened? Had Kwame done something to implicate me in a crime? Had the EFCC investigation been compromised? Don't answer it, I whispered urgently. Call Sarah Oguntate first. Verify that they actually sent someone. I heard Folake moving around her apartment, then her whispered voice. Sister, I'm looking through the peephole. There are 2 men in police uniforms, but they don't look official. Their uniforms are wrong, different badges, different colors. False police. In Lagos, this was a common tactic used by criminals to gain access to homes and businesses. But who would send fake police to look for me? And why? Folake, get away from the door. Call 199 immediately and report attempted impersonation of police officers. Miss Folake, the voice called again, we have a warrant for your sister's arrest. We know she's been staying with you. A warrant for my arrest? For what? I'd done nothing illegal. Unless someone had discovered that I was cooperating with the EFCC investigation. Unless Kwame or his business partners had decided to frame me for something to discredit me before I could testify against them. Sister, they're trying the door handle now. Get to your bedroom and lock the door. Call the police. Call Sarah. Call Inspector Akwu. Do it now. I heard Folake's hurried footsteps, then the sound of her bedroom door slamming and the lock clicking into place. Over the phone, I could hear the fake policeman becoming more aggressive, rattling the door handle and speaking in raised voices. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. Adunni, you're making this very difficult for everyone involved. The voice was smooth, cultured, definitely not Kwame. My name is Chief Adebayo. I'm what you might call a business associate of your husband's. Chief Adebayo. I'd heard that name before, whispered in phone conversations Kwame thought I couldn't hear. If I remembered correctly, he was involved in government contracting, possibly with connections to the Ministry of Works. What do you want? I want to have a civilized conversation with you about your husband's business affairs. Specifically, I want to discuss what information you might have shared with certain government agencies. So they knew about the EFCC investigation. The question was, how? I don't know what you're talking about. Chief Adebayo chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Okafor, please don't insult my intelligence. We know you met with Detective Chief Inspector Akwu today. We know you've been gathering financial documents. We know you're planning to testify against your husband. My heart hammered against my ribs. If they had this level of information about my activities, they either had someone inside the EFCC or they were monitoring me more closely than I'd realized. Even if that were true, what business is it of yours? Your husband owes certain people certain favors. Money that was invested in his success with the expectation of specific returns. If he goes to prison because of information you provide, those investments become worthless. That sounds like a problem between you and Kwame. Unfortunately, Mrs. Okafor, you've made it our problem too. But we're reasonable people. We're willing to make this worth your while. I heard police sirens wailing in the distance, the real police, responding to Folake's call. I have to go. Wait. Mrs. Okafor, think carefully about what you do next. Your sister lives alone in a building with very little security. You're staying in hotels, which makes you easy to track. Your career, your reputation, your safety. All of these things can be affected by the choices you make. The line went dead just as I heard shouting from Folake's apartment. The fake police retreating as the real ones arrived. I sat on my hotel bed, hands shaking, finally understanding the true scope of what I'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about my abusive husband anymore. Kwame was connected to people with serious money and serious power, people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt me or my family to protect their interests. But even as fear coursed through my veins, something else burned brighter: rage. They thought they could intimidate me with fake police and veiled threats. They thought I would back down and let Kwame continue his abuse, while they all got rich from stolen government money. They had seriously underestimated Adunni Okafor. I called Inspector Akwu immediately. Inspector, we have a problem. They know about our meeting today, and they just sent fake police to my sister's apartment. Mrs. Okafor, where are you right now? Don't tell me over the phone, but are you safe? For now. But Inspector, how did they know I met with you? How did they get that information so quickly? There was a long pause. That's concerning. We'll need to review our security protocols. But right now, I need you to listen carefully. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't return to your apartment or any location they might expect you to visit. Can you get to our office tomorrow morning? What about the plan to gather documents from Kwame's office? That plan just became much more dangerous. But, Mrs. Okafor, it also became much more important. If these people are willing to send fake police officers after you, it means the evidence you can provide is even more valuable than we thought. After we hung up, I called Folake to make sure she was safe. The real police had arrived in time, and the fake officers had scattered. But she was shaken, and I could hear the fear in her voice. Sister, maybe it's time to consider that this is bigger than you can handle. These people, they're not just threatening you anymore. They're threatening me too. She was right, but backing down now would mean letting Kwame and his associates win. It would mean accepting that powerful men could abuse their wives and steal government money without consequences. It would mean that everything I'd suffered had been for nothing. Folake, I need you to go stay with Mama in Abadan for a few days, just until this is sorted out. And what about you? I'm going to finish what I started. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with one final text message from an unknown number. Last chance, Mrs. Okafor. Walk away now or face the consequences. Instead of feeling intimidated, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years of marriage to Kwame. Absolute clarity about what needed to be done. Tomorrow, I would go to Kwame's office. I would gather every piece of evidence I could find, and I would hand it all over to the EFCC, no matter what threats these people made. Because sometimes, the only way to stop being a victim is to become something your enemies never expected. Someone who fights back harder than they do. Like and subscribe if you think Adunni should fight back. What would you do in her situation? Comment below. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I stood outside the gleaming office building in Victoria Island, where Kwame rented space for his construction company headquarters. The EFCC surveillance team was in position, though I couldn't see them. Inspector Akwu had assured me they would intervene if anything went wrong, but once I entered that building, I was essentially on my own. The security guard, Musa, recognized me immediately. Good morning, Madam Adunni. Oga is not in yet. I know. I need to pick up some documents for him. He's expecting me. Musa nodded and waved me through. If only it were always this easy. Kwame's office was on the 7th floor, a spacious corner suite that reflected his inflated sense of importance. The walls were covered with photographs of him shaking hands with government officials, breaking ground at construction sites, and posing with expensive machinery. I had maybe 90 minutes before he typically arrived at the office. My hands trembled as I inserted the key card and heard the lock click open. The office was exactly as I remembered it. Massive mahogany desk, leather chairs, and a wall safe that I'd watched Kwame open countless times. He always used the same combination. Our wedding date followed by his mother's birth year. I started with his computer, which required a password I'd seen him type dozens of times. Adunni 2019, the year we'd bought our Lagos apartment. The irony of using my name in his password while planning to betray me wasn't lost on me. The computer revealed a treasure trove of information. Bank statements showing deposits that dwarfed anything I'd seen in our personal accounts. Email correspondence with Chief Adebayo and other men whose names I recognized from Kwame's phone calls. Contract documents that showed massive payments for construction projects that, according to the photos attached, appeared to be minimal or incomplete work. I photographed everything, my phone's camera working overtime as I documented payment schedules, bank transfer records, and email chains that clearly showed coordination between Kwame, Chief Adebayo, and what appeared to be corrupt officials in the Ministry of Works. One email chain made my blood run cold. It was from 3 days ago, just one day after Kwame had hit me in front of his friends. From k.okafor@okaforconst.ng to chief.adebayo@connectionsul.ng. Subject: Wife problem. Chief, we may have a situation. Adunni is acting erratic since our disagreement yesterday. She knows too much about the business finances, and she's angry enough to cause problems. Recommend we discuss contingency plans for managing this situation. She has access to some of our banking information. Chief Adebayo's response was even more chilling. Kwame, wives can be managed if you know how to apply the right pressure. Have you considered that she might have an unfortunate accident? Or perhaps we discover evidence of her own criminal behavior. I have contacts in the FCC who could be helpful if we need to redirect their attention. Contacts in the FCC. That explained how they'd known about my meeting with Inspector Akwu so quickly. I photographed every email in the chain, including Chief Adebayo's suggestions for managing me and Kwame's responses discussing how much I knew about their operations. The wall safe was next. My fingers shook as I entered the combination, but the heavy door swung open to reveal stacks of cash, multiple passports, and a collection of documents that made my eyes widen. Bank statements from accounts in Ghana, Dubai, and London. Property deeds for houses I'd never heard of. Business partnership agreements with companies that appeared to exist only on paper. And most damning of all, a ledger in Kwame's handwriting that detailed payments to government officials for specific contract awards. I was photographing the ledger when I heard voices in the outer office. My heart stopped. It was too early for Kwame to be here, but I could clearly hear his voice talking to someone, multiple someones. Had they discovered I was in the building? Had Musa called to report my presence? I quickly closed the safe and gathered my phone, checking to make sure all the photos had been properly saved. The voices were getting closer, and I could now make out Kwame's words clearly. Check the office first, then we'll decide how to handle this. She's been too quiet since our last conversation, and that makes me nervous. They were here looking for me. Somehow, they'd figured out that I might try to access Kwame's office. The door to the inner office was solid wood, but I could hear at least 3 different voices now. Kwame, Chief Adebayo's distinctive culture tones, and a third man I didn't recognize. I moved quickly to the window and looked down at the 7-story drop to Victoria Island's busy street below. No escape that way. The only exit was through the door they were approaching. My phone buzzed with a text from Inspector Akwu. Surveillance team reports 3 men entering your location. Are you safe? I typed back quickly. Trapped in office. Have the evidence. Need extraction. Stay hidden. Help is coming. But where could I hide in an office with nowhere to run? I heard Kwame's key card in the outer door, then his voice much clearer now. If she's been in here, there will be signs. Check the computer. Check the safe. The inner office door was locked, but I knew Kwame had a key. In maybe 30 seconds, he would discover me here with evidence of his crimes on my phone and no way to escape. That's when I noticed the second door I'd forgotten about, a service entrance that connected to the adjacent office suite. It had been locked for years, but as I approached it desperately, I realized the lock was broken. I slipped through just as I heard Kwame's key in the inner office door. The computer's been accessed, I heard Chief Adebayo say. Recently. And look at the safe, it's not quite closed properly. She was here. Kwame's voice was deadly quiet. My wife was here, gathering evidence against us. Then we have a serious problem, the third voice said. Because if she has documentation of our arrangement with the ministry officials. We find her, Chief Adebayo interrupted. Tonight. And we make sure she understands that some secrets are too dangerous to share. I crept through the empty adjacent office, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the walls. As I reached the outer door, I heard footsteps behind me. They were checking the connecting door. I ran for the elevator, praying it would arrive before they caught me. As the doors closed, I saw Kwame burst through the adjacent office door, his eyes blazing with fury. Our eyes met for just a moment before the elevator doors shut completely. In that brief instant, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Not just anger, but calculation. Kwame was already planning his next move. As the elevator descended, I realized that I'd gotten what I came for, evidence that could destroy Kwame and his associates. But I'd also escalated this conflict to a point where there might be no peaceful resolution. The war between us had just become a matter of survival. Share this story if you're on the edge of your seat. What do you think Kwame will do next? Drop your predictions in the comments. Inspector Akwu was waiting for me in the lobby with two plainclothes officers, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. The fact that he'd felt the need to come personally told me how serious this situation had become. Mrs. Okafor, we need to get you somewhere safe immediately, he said, guiding me toward an unmarked police vehicle. Our surveillance team reported that the men in your husband's office made several phone calls after you left. We have reason to believe they're mobilizing additional resources to locate you. As we drove through Lagos traffic, I showed Inspector Akwu the photographs I'd taken. His expression grew increasingly grave as he scrolled through the images of bank statements, email exchanges, and most damning of all, the handwritten ledger detailing payments to government officials. Mrs. Okafor, this is beyond what we expected. The scale of the corruption, the amounts involved, the number of officials implicated. He paused. This could bring down half the Ministry of Works. Is that good or bad for me? It's complicated. This level of evidence makes you incredibly valuable to our investigation, but it also makes you incredibly dangerous to them. They can't afford to let you testify. My phone had been buzzing constantly during our drive. Text messages from unknown numbers, missed calls from Kwame, and increasingly frantic messages from numbers I recognized as his business associates. One text message made my blood run cold. We have eyes on your sister's hospital. Beautiful woman, Folake. Would hate for something to happen to her at work. I showed the message to Inspector Akwu, who immediately made a phone call to what I assumed was Lagos State Police. We're putting protective detail on your sister immediately, he assured me. But Mrs. Okafor, I need to be honest with you. These people have significant resources and government connections. We can protect you, but it's going to require major changes to your life. What kind of changes? Witness protection, new identity, relocation, the works. And even then, testifying against these people will put you at risk for years to come. I thought about the woman I'd been just a week ago, accepting abuse, making excuses, living in fear. That woman would have been terrified by the prospect of witness protection. But something had fundamentally changed in me. Inspector, if I don't testify, what happens to them? Without your evidence and testimony, they probably continue stealing government money and corrupting officials. Your husband continues beating you. And other women in similar situations continue suffering because these men face no consequences. Then there's no choice to make. We arrived at a safe house in Surulere, a modest apartment building that looked entirely ordinary from the outside. Inspector Akwu explained that I would be staying here under police protection while they prepared the case for prosecution. But as we were walking up to the apartment, my phone rang with a call from Chioma. Adunni, we have a serious problem. Kwame just filed an emergency motion claiming that you've stolen business documents and are attempting to blackmail him. He's requesting immediate police protection and asking for a warrant for your arrest. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? He can try. But Adunni, there's more. He's also filed a complaint alleging that you've been having an affair with someone at the EFCC and that you're fabricating evidence to frame him because your lover promised you favorable treatment. The audacity was breathtaking, but also brilliant. By claiming I was romantically involved with law enforcement, Kwame was trying to discredit both me and any evidence I provided. By alleging theft and blackmail, he was positioning himself as the victim of a vindictive wife. Chioma, everything he's claiming is false. I can prove. I know it's false. But Adunni, he's gotten to a magistrate somehow, probably through his connections, and there's actually a warrant being processed for your arrest right now. Inspector Akwu, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, took the phone from me. Barrister Nwankwo, this is Detective Chief Inspector Akwu from EFCC. I need you to understand that Mrs. Okafor is under our protection as a key witness in a major corruption investigation. Any attempts to arrest her on domestic charges will be seen as interference with a federal investigation. I could hear Chioma's voice through the phone, but couldn't make out her words. Inspector Akwa's expression grew increasingly serious as she spoke. I see. And you're certain about the magistrate's identity? Yes, I understand. We'll handle this appropriately. He hung up and turned to me with a grim expression. Mrs. Okafor, the magistrate who signed the warrant for your arrest, is named in your husband's ledger as receiving monthly payments from their operation. The corruption ran even deeper than I'd realized. They weren't just stealing government money. They'd compromised the very judicial system that was supposed to hold them accountable. What does that mean for me? It means we're going to accelerate everything. We're taking this case directly to the Federal High Court and requesting emergency protection orders. But Mrs. Okafor, yes. It also means that until we can get those orders, you're technically a fugitive. If regular police encounter you, they'll be obligated to arrest you based on the warrant. As if summoned by his words, we heard vehicles pulling up outside the building. Through the window, I could see Lagos State Police vehicles, not the unmarked EFCC cars I'd been expecting. Inspector Akwu pulled out his radio. Command, this is Akwu. We have a situation at the safe house. It appears local police have been dispatched here, possibly based on the fraudulent warrant we discussed. The radio crackled back. Inspector, you need to know that the order to find Mrs. Okafor came from very high up in Lagos State Police. Someone with serious influence is pushing this. I watched through the window as uniformed officers surrounded the building. These weren't corrupt fake police like the ones who had threatened Folake. These were real officers following what they believed to be legitimate orders to arrest me. Inspector Akwu made a decision quickly. Mrs. Okafor, we're leaving. Now, through the back entrance. As we hurried down the building's rear stairwell, I realized that Kwame and his associates had just demonstrated the true scope of their power. They could corrupt magistrates, mobilize police resources, and turn the entire legal system against me within hours of discovering I had evidence against them. But they'd also made a critical mistake. By overreacting so dramatically, by deploying so many resources against me, they'd confirmed everything I was alleging about their corruption. No innocent businessman would have this level of influence with law enforcement. As we escaped through the building's service entrance into the chaotic streets of Lagos, I knew that the next few hours would determine whether I survived this fight or became another woman who disappeared for knowing too much about powerful men's secrets. The game had changed completely, but I was still playing to win. Hit that notification bell. This story is getting more intense by the minute, and you won't want to miss what happens next. We drove through Lagos in Inspector Akwa's personal car, a beat-up Honda that would never be mistaken for a police vehicle, while he made urgent calls to his superiors. The official EFCC vehicles had been compromised, he explained. Too many people in law enforcement now knew to look for me, thanks to Kwame's corrupt magistrate and well-placed bribes. Director, we need emergency intervention from Abuja, Inspector Akwu said into his phone. The Lagos operation has been compromised at multiple levels. Yes, sir, I understand the political sensitivities, but we have evidence of corruption that goes to the highest levels of state government. No, sir, I don't think we can trust local law enforcement at this point. As he spoke, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Adunni, this is Adunni. His voice was strained, nervous. From last night, from Kwame's apartment. Adunni, one of the friends who had watched Kwame hit me. One of the men I'd assumed was complicit in whatever my husband was doing. What do you want, Adunni? I need to warn you. Kwame called an emergency meeting this morning. All his business partners, some people I'd never seen before. They're planning something, Adunni. Something that... He paused. Something that made me very uncomfortable. What kind of something? They're not just trying to discredit you anymore. They're talking about making you disappear permanently. Chief Adebayo brought in some men, professional men, if you understand me. My blood ran cold. Professional men. In Lagos, that usually meant hired killers. Why are you telling me this? Because what I saw last night, watching Kwame hit you like that, in front of us, it wasn't right. And this morning, listening to them plan, this isn't the man I thought I knew. Inspector Akwu was gesturing for me to put the call on speaker. Adunni, are you willing to testify about what you heard in that meeting? There was a long pause. You don't understand, Adunni. These people, they have connections everywhere. If I testify against them. If you don't testify against them, they're going to kill me. And probably you too, now that you've called to warn me. Another pause, then a shaky exhale. What do you need me to do? Inspector Akwu took over the conversation, explaining how Adunni could provide testimony in exchange for protective custody. But as they spoke, I noticed something alarming. We were being followed. A black SUV had been behind us for the past 10 minutes, maintaining the same distance through multiple turns. When Inspector Akwu took a sudden right turn onto a side street, the SUV followed. Inspector, I interrupted his conversation with Adunni. We have a problem. He glanced in his rearview mirror and immediately ended the call. Hold on, Mrs. Okafor. What followed was like something from an action movie, except the fear was absolutely real. Inspector Akwu drove through Lagos traffic with skill that suggested this wasn't his first high-speed pursuit, weaving between Danfo buses and Okada motorcycles while our pursuers tried to keep up. Who are these people? I asked, gripping the door handle as we took a sharp turn onto Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Could be police acting on the warrant, could be Kwame's hired professionals, could be Chief Adebayo's people. At this point, it doesn't matter. None of them have good intentions for you. My phone buzzed with a text from Kwame. Adunni, you've made this much harder than it needed to be. Last chance to come home and handle this quietly, or face the consequences of your choices. I showed the message to Inspector Akwu, who shook his head grimly. He's still trying to make this seem like a domestic dispute, even now, with hired killers chasing us through Lagos. We lost our pursuers in the maze of streets around Ojulegba, but Inspector Akwu didn't slow down. He drove us to what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse in an industrial area of Lagos mainland. Where are we? Safe house number 2. This one isn't in any official files, and only 3 people know about it. He paused as we pulled into the warehouse. Well, for people now. Inside the warehouse was a surprisingly well-equipped apartment, communications equipment, computers, enough supplies to last for weeks. But what caught my attention immediately were the other people. 2 women and a man, all looking as stressed and frightened as I felt. Mrs. Okafor, meet our other guests, Inspector Akwu said. Mrs. Amaka Nwosu, former accountant for Chief Adebayo's companies. Mr. Tunbekere, former construction supervisor for several government contracts. And Dr. Sarah Ademola, former Ministry of Works liaison. Other witnesses. Other people who had discovered the corruption and were now in hiding, waiting to testify. How long have you been here? I asked them. 3 weeks, Mrs. Nwosu answered. They killed my husband 2 days after I went to the authorities. Made it look like armed robbery. The weight of what I was facing hit me fully for the first time. This wasn't just about getting revenge on an abusive husband. This was about taking on a network of corruption that had already killed to protect itself. Mrs. Okafor, Dr. Ademola said quietly, your husband's organization is just one part of a much larger system. What you've uncovered, it could expose billions of naira in stolen government funds. And dozens of government officials who've been taking bribes, Mr. Becker added, including some very powerful people who won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens them. As the reality sank in, I felt a moment of doubt. Was bringing down Kwame worth risking my life? Worth risking Folek's life? Worth potentially dying for the sake of justice? But then I thought about the woman who had stood in her living room 5 days ago, accepting abuse in front of witnesses, making excuses for her husband's violence. That woman was gone forever, and I wouldn't dishonor her suffering by backing down now. Inspector, I said, what do we need to do to end this? Tomorrow morning, we present all our evidence to a federal judge in Abuja, someone we know isn't compromised. We request emergency protection orders and immediate arrests. But Mrs. Okafor, yes. Once we do that, there's no going back. These people will know that you're not just a bitter wife trying to get revenge. They'll know you're the witness who could bring down their entire operation. Outside the warehouse, Lagos continued its chaotic rhythm, unaware that in this hidden corner of the city, a group of ordinary people was preparing to take on one of the most corrupt networks in Nigerian government. I thought about Kwame, probably sitting in his expensive apartment right now, confident that his money and connections would protect him from the consequences of his actions. He had no idea that his abused wife had become the center of an investigation that could reshape Lagos politics. But he was about to find out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tomorrow's chapter reveals whether Adunni can survive long enough to get justice. And you won't believe what Kwame tries next. At 3 a.m., the warehouse's alarm system started screaming. Inspector Akwu was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn, moving to the security monitors with military precision. The rest of us, for witnesses who had thought we were finally safe, huddled together as we watched armed figures moving around the perimeter of the building on the grainy black and white screens. How did they find us? Mrs. Nwosu whispered, her voice tight with terror. Someone talked. Inspector Akwu said grimly, speaking into his radio. Command, we have multiple hostiles at Safe House Delta. Request immediate backup. The radio crackled back with devastating news. Inspector, be advised that backup may be compromised. We have reports of communication intercepts. Unknown how much operational information has been leaked. They had people inside the EFCC. The corruption ran so deep that even our safe houses weren't safe. Mrs. Okafor, Inspector Akwu said urgently, I need you to take this. He handed me a small recording device and a USB drive. Everything we've gathered on your husband's operation is on that drive. The testimonies, the financial records, your photographs, everything. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're the only one who can get it to Abuja. The rest of us are known to them now, but you might still have a chance. Through the monitors, we could see the armed figures moving closer. These weren't police. Their equipment and tactics looked military, professional, lethal. There's a tunnel that leads to the next building, Dr. Ademola said suddenly. From the old sewage system. I noticed it when we arrived, but didn't think. Show me, Inspector Akwu commanded, as Dr. Ademola led us to a concealed entrance in the warehouse floor. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Kwame. With shaking hands, I answered it and put it on speaker. If these are going to be my final moments, I wanted witnesses to hear what my husband had to say. Adunni, you're surrounded. There's no way out. Kwame's voice was calm, almost conversational. This has gone far enough. Just walk out the front door with your hands up, and we can still resolve this quietly. Quietly? Like you resolved things quietly when you had Mrs. Nwosu's husband killed. There was a pause. That was unfortunate. Business decisions sometimes have unintended consequences. But it doesn't have to end that way for you. What are you offering, Kwame? Divorce, with a generous settlement. A new life, somewhere far from Lagos. All you have to do is destroy whatever evidence you think you have and disappear. Inspector Akwu was shaking his head frantically, but I had an idea. What about the other witnesses? What about the people with me? They've made their choices, Adunni. I'm only offering you this deal because despite everything, you're still my wife. The tunnel entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for one person at a time. Inspector Akwu was ushering the other witnesses down first, but I lingered, still talking to Kwame. You really think I would abandon these people? After what you've put me through? I think you're smart enough to know when you're beaten. You can't fight the entire system, Adunni. We have too much money, too many connections, too much power. You know what, Kwame? You're right about one thing. What's that? I can't fight the entire system. I paused as Inspector Akwu gestured urgently for me to enter the tunnel. But I don't have to. I just have to fight you. I hung up and dropped into the tunnel just as the warehouse's main door exploded inward. The tunnel was a nightmare of darkness, water, and claustrophobic terror. We crawled through what felt like miles of abandoned infrastructure while behind us, I could hear shouts and gunfire as the armed men searched the warehouse. When we finally emerged in the basement of an abandoned office building 3 blocks away, we were soaked, exhausted, and traumatized, but alive. Mrs. Okafor, Inspector Akwu, said as we caught our breath, "You need to get to Abuja immediately. Take the USB drive to Federal High Court Justice Adebayo Ogundimu. He's clean, and he has the authority to issue emergency protection orders. What about all of you? We'll create distractions, try to draw their attention away from you. But you're the primary witness now. If something happens to us, you're the only one who can still bring them down." As dawn broke over Lagos, I found myself in the back of a commercial bus heading toward Murtala Muhammad Airport, disguised in clothes borrowed from Dr. Ademola and carrying evidence that could topple one of the most corrupt networks in Nigerian politics. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from Kwame, Chief Adebayo, and numbers I didn't recognize. The final message from Kwame was chilling. "Adunni, you've just signed your own death warrant. You'll never be safe anywhere in the world, as long as you have that evidence. Last chance to be reasonable." But as the airport came into view, I realized something that Kwame hadn't calculated in all his threats and bribes. I was no longer afraid of him. The terrified, abused woman who had accepted violence in her own living room was gone. In her place was someone who had discovered that the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't a corrupt, violent man with money and connections. It was a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. As I boarded the early morning flight to Abuja, carrying evidence that could change everything, I knew that whatever happened next, Kwame had created his own worst nightmare. He had pushed his wife too far, and she had finally decided to push back. The war was almost over, and he was about to discover that he had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss the explosive finale. Comment your predictions for how this ends. Justice Adebayo Ogundimu's chambers in the Federal High Court, Abuja, were everything I had hoped they would be: orderly, dignified, and most importantly, clean of corruption. The elderly judge listened with growing amazement as I presented the evidence I'd gathered against Kwame's network. "Mrs. Okafor, in 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen documentation this comprehensive," he said, scrolling through the photographs on my phone. "Bank records, email exchanges, handwritten ledgers. This is a prosecutor's dream. Your Honor, I need protection orders immediately. These people have already killed to protect their secrets, and they've made it clear that I'm next." Justice Ogundimu was already drafting orders as we spoke. "I'm issuing emergency protection for you and your family, freezing all assets connected to these accounts, and authorizing the immediate arrest of everyone named in this evidence." My phone had been silent during our meeting. I turned off the ringer out of respect for the court. But when I checked it afterward, I had 47 missed calls and dozens of text messages, all increasingly desperate. The most recent message from Chief Adebayo was different in tone from all the others. "Mrs. Okafor, you have won. We are prepared to negotiate a complete withdrawal from all business activities and full restitution to the government. Please contact us to discuss terms." They were surrendering, but I wasn't done yet. "Your Honor, there's one more thing I need to request." "Yes, Mrs. Okafor. I want to face my husband in court on the record, with all of this evidence presented formally. I want him to answer for what he did to me personally, not just what he stole from the government." Justice Ogundimu smiled. The first time his stern expression had softened since I'd entered his chambers. Mrs. Okafor, it would be my pleasure to preside over that confrontation. 3 days later, I sat in a packed federal high court courtroom in Lagos, watching as Kwame was led in wearing handcuffs and prison clothing. The man who had terrorized me for years looked smaller somehow, diminished by the reality of facing consequences for his actions. His legal team, the most expensive lawyers his stolen money could buy, had already tried every delaying tactic they could think of. But with Justice Ogundimu presiding and federal prosecutors presenting an airtight case, there was nowhere left to hide. Mr. Okafor, Justice Ogundimu addressed my soon-to-be ex-husband directly. You stand accused of conspiracy, money laundering, bribery of government officials, and domestic violence. How do you plead? Kwame's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Kwame pushed him away and stood up. Your Honor, I want to speak directly to my wife. Justice Ogundimu looked at me. Mrs. Okafor, do you wish to hear what your husband has to say? I nodded, my heart hammering, but my voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. Kwame turned to face me across the courtroom. For a moment, I saw a flash of the man I had fallen in love with 10 years ago. Before the money, before the violence, before the corruption. Adunni, I never meant for it to go this far. The business, the contracts, the money, it started small, just trying to provide for us, to give you the life I thought you deserved. And the beatings, Kwame? Did those start small too? My voice carried clearly across the silent courtroom. Was hitting me in front of your friends part of providing for me? His face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. I became someone I didn't recognize. The money, the power, it changed me. But Adunni, I loved you. I still love you. Love. I stood up, every eye in the courtroom on me. Kwame, love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't make threats. Love doesn't plan to have your wife killed when she finally stands up for herself. The prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. Bank statements showing 847 million naira in stolen government funds, email chains proving bribery of officials, recordings of threats against witnesses, and my photographs documenting years of domestic abuse. But the moment that broke Kwame completely was when Adunni took the stand. I watched him hit his wife in front of us. Adunni testified, his voice shaking. And when she left, instead of being ashamed, Kwame bragged about putting her in her place. He said all women needed to be reminded of their position from time to time. Kwame's shoulders sagged as his former friend, detailed the meeting where they had discussed having me killed rather than face exposure of their crimes. When the prosecution rested, Kwame's lawyer made one final attempt to portray his client as a victim of my vindictive lies. But the evidence was overwhelming, the testimony was corroborated, and the financial records spoke for themselves. Justice Ogundimu's sentence was swift and severe. 25 years in federal prison for financial crimes, 5 years for domestic violence, and complete forfeiture of all assets obtained through criminal activity. Mr. Okafor, the judge said solemnly, you had everything a man could want: a successful business, a loving wife, a position of respect in your community. But you chose greed over honesty, violence over love, and intimidation over integrity. The consequences are entirely of your own making. As the bailiffs led Kwame away, he turned back to look at me one last time. I saw no anger in his eyes anymore, just a broken man finally understanding what his choices had cost him. Chief Adebayo and 17 government officials were arrested that same day. The investigation I had started by gathering evidence in my husband's office had exposed the largest corruption scandal in Lagos state history. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtroom for my divorce proceedings. The settlement was straightforward. I received our legitimate assets, the apartment we'd bought with my salary, the car I'd paid for, our savings from before Kwame's criminal enterprise began. Everything else was forfeit to the government as proceeds of crime. Mrs. Okafor, Justice Ogundimu said as he signed the final divorce decree, you have shown remarkable courage in bringing this corruption to light. Do you have any final words? I thought about the woman who had stood in her living room 7 months ago, accepting abuse because she was too scared and ashamed to fight back. I thought about all the women who were still in that position, still making excuses for men who hurt them, still believing they deserved less than dignity and respect. Your Honor, I want other women to know that it's never too late to fight back. No man's money, no man's connections, no man's threats are more powerful than a woman who decides she deserves better. The courtroom erupted in applause, from the journalists covering the story, from the women's rights activists who had supported me throughout the trial, from ordinary Nigerian women who had been following my case and finding their own courage to leave abusive situations. Today, I run a nonprofit organization that helps women escape domestic violence and corruption. We provide legal support, safe housing, and most importantly, the knowledge that they are not alone in their fight for justice. Kwame writes me letters from prison sometimes. He claims to have found God, says he's a changed man, asks for forgiveness. I don't respond to these letters, but I don't throw them away either. They serve as a reminder of how far I've traveled from the woman who once accepted his violence as the price of marriage. The revenge I took on Kwame wasn't what anyone expected, not even me. I didn't destroy him with lies or manipulation or violence. I destroyed him with truth, with evidence, with the justice system he thought his money had corrupted beyond reach. The most powerful revenge against a man who thinks he owns you is proving that you were never his property to begin with. Sometimes the best way to destroy your enemy is to stop being afraid of him and start fighting back with everything you have. Kwame thought he was dealing with a broken, frightened wife. Instead, he discovered he was facing a woman who refused to stay broken. And that made all the difference. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe to Tales by Ben, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve better. What did you think of Adunni's journey? Comment your thoughts below. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay a victim. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story of courage, justice, and the power of fighting back.